Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're looking at something pretty strange happening in the skies over the Indo-Pacific. Again and again, debris from Chinese rockets is falling in the same area, dangerously close to the Philippines. We're going to break down why this is almost certainly not an accident.
So let's just start with the main question right off the bat. Why does this keep happening in the exact same spot? Is this just a string of really unlucky coincidences, or is there something more deliberate going on here?
Okay, this map tells you so much of the story in just one look. See those red lines? Those are China's recent rocket launch corridors. Notice how they slice right across the Philippines. Now look at South Korea's path in blue. It heads straight out into the wide open ocean, well away from any populated areas. That huge difference is exactly what we're digging into today.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to establish that this is for sure a pattern. Then, we'll look at why 2025 is such a pivotal year in this story. We'll ask if this is all by design or if it's just a necessity. After that, we'll explain this idea of gray zone pressure. And finally, we'll wrap up with why this matters to everyone.
All right, first up, a pattern emerges. To really get what's happening, you can't just look at these launches as one-off events. You've got to zoom out and connect the dots the data's giving us.
And just look at the detail here. We're not talking about one type of rocket. It's a whole family of them. You've got the Long March 3B, the 7A, 8A, 12, and even the giant Long March 5. And they are all over a 2-year period using these exact same flight paths. When you see that kind of repetition with so many different launch vehicles, well, that's your first huge clue this is no accident.
And it's not just us saying this. Official notices from the Philippine Space Agency basically confirm it. They've identified what they call a usable south-facing drop zone corridor. I mean, that language tells you everything, right? This is a systematic, planned-out operation, not just a series of random events.
Okay, now let's talk about the year 2025, because this is where the pattern goes from just being consistent to being, well, critical. This is a deliberate acceleration of what they've been doing.
In 2025, 3 big things change. First, they start adding new, more powerful rockets like the Long March 5 into the mix. Second, the pace, the frequency of launches, just goes way up. And third, and this is probably the most important part, the drop zones themselves actually start moving closer, pushing inward toward the Philippine Islands. The stakes are getting high.
This timeline really lays out the strategy perfectly. You see, 2023 to 2024 was what you could call the establishment phase. They were creating and testing this corridor. But then, 2025 kicks off a clear acceleration phase. They're using that same corridor, but more often, more aggressively, and with a lot more risk to people on the ground.
But, okay, let's ask the question. Is it possible this is all just for, engineering convenience? Is this the only way they can launch these rockets? Let's take a look at the evidence, because it really suggests there are other options on the table. Remember that map from the beginning? Let's bring it back, because this really gets to the heart of the whole thing. South Korea launches its Nuri rocket from a pretty similar region, right? But look at their trajectory in blue. It goes almost straight south, completely avoiding the Philippines and dropping debris safely in the middle of the open ocean.
Putting them side by side like this makes it pretty undeniable. The flight path is a choice, not a geographical requirement. China chooses a southeast path. South Korea chooses a southern one. One country is basically offloading its risk onto its neighbor. The other one isn't.
So here's the bottom line. Where rocket debris falls isn't some random act of physics. It is an engineering outcome. It's planned, it's calculated based on trajectory and design. And all the evidence here points to a very deliberate choice to put that risk right on another country's doorstep.
So this consistent choice to push risk onto someone else, it's not just about rockets. It actually fits perfectly into a well-known geopolitical strategy. It's called gray zone pressure, and it's all about applying force without ever having to start an actual fight. This is a textbook gray zone operation. It's a coercive action, right? It's designed to achieve some strategic goal, like asserting your presence or testing your neighbor's reactions, all while staying just below that line, the line that would trigger a serious military or diplomatic response.
So here's the playbook. You find a legal gray area, like the difference between a country's sovereign territory and its wider exclusive economic zone, an area where they have rights, but it's not quite the same. Then, you just repeat a risky action over and over and over until it starts to feel normal. You turn it into an established practice. And that makes it really hard for a country like the Philippines to protest every single incident. And if they do, they can be painted as overreacting. It's a clever and, frankly, frustrating tactic.
So let's pull this all together. Why does this pattern matter beyond, the very real local risk to Filipino fishermen or air traffic? What's the big takeaway for all of us?
What the 2025 acceleration tells us is that this strategy is moving into a new phase. It's about making this exported risk the new normal. And you can bet this isn't just about the Philippines. This is a test case for a much, much wider strategy.
And the implications for the whole region are huge. If this tactic works here, it sets a really dangerous precedent. It becomes okay to just dump your aerospace risks onto other nations. It's a way to test the political will of all the countries in the area, and it creates a playbook that could easily be used in other hotspots, like the areas around Taiwan. It really highlights why some kind of collective response is so critical.
And that leaves us with one last, really crucial question that strategists, not just in the region, but around the world, have to face now. When a calculated risk is deliberately turned into a routine, everyday norm, how do you effectively push back without making things worse? That right there, that's the central challenge of the gray zone.